Laura Bentley, welcome to the show. It's so good to have you on with us.
Thank you for having me.
So exciting. I feel like I know you, girlfriend, from all of your
I
escapades. It's so
love
nice
it.
to connect in this way. For everyone listening, I'll give you a little bit of a brief update on our girl Laura. So she's a mum of four. I feel like I need to drop the mic on that one and walk away because I do not know how you do that. That is two times the amount of children that I have, and I'm only just surviving.
Not well, but I'm still here.
No, I love it. So, Mother Four, and really well known, particularly in social media, for her really relatable, funny, and just so, yeah, real and authentic content that you put out about the everyday life of, I guess, parenthood, right? And so, but having said that, our podcast, Laura, is we really like to explore, I guess, some of the challenges that we've experienced as parents. And so, I want to go a little bit deep with you today, girl, if that if that works for you.
Here
And
for it.
just sort of see who is the woman behind the gram and all of that funny content that you put out. So I did a bit of peruse of your content, and I want to start with this thing that you wrote. I think it forms really beautiful context for what I think will be a really supportive topic for everyone listening. So you said more recently, growing up, I always thought it was me, that it was about my siblings and I. Was it that we weren't lovable enough? Were we not good enough for her to want to stay and to try harder? I always thought that leaving kids must be an easy thing to do. And then I had my own. And I'm reminded in every cuddle with them that I was lovable and worthy of so much more than what we were given. As an adult reflecting back, of course, I know she had her demons, but will never stop questioning why she couldn't do better for us. And even reading that, like I get chills. Yeah, that is so raw and honest, and like I know a very confronting way to start the pod, but I'd love to start there. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like having an absent mum growing up?
Um, I mean, when you're little, you don't know that it's not what everybody else is experiencing anyway. I guess the parts that you know that you're different is, back in the 90s, even if families did split up, everybody stayed with the mum, whereas we were with our dad. So it was, I remember, I think maybe grade two, my nickname was Laura Bent, no mum Lee.
Mm.
And I carry that to this day. Like, kids are mean, man.
Wow.
Or the teacher would be like, you need to get your mum to sign this permission slip or you can't
Mm.
come. And I remember going home and crying, being like, well, I can't go because I can't reach mum. Mum's 3 hours away. But yeah, and I guess the biggest differences would be around like Father's Day and Mother's Day. We obviously didn't celebrate Mother's Day, and I always just felt a bit left out when we were doing all of the Mother's Day things because it's not that I didn't have a mum, I had a mum, but we only saw her every other school holidays. So yeah, you knew that you were different, but I guess the gravity of that didn't really hit me until I had my own.
How old were you when she left?
I think I was year three, so that would have put me as like an 8-year-old.
Wow. So certainly old enough to understand like the gravity. I mean, if you were, for example, a baby, and not to say it's easier either which way, but to some extent, if you know no different, it is
Mm.
different to an 8-year-old, a well-established human being. If you don't mind me asking, was like, I mean, it's never expected, but was there a bit of turmoil in which it sort of made sense to some extent as an adult when you look back as to why she needed to leave, or is it
Oh,
still a little bit confusing?
100%.
Yeah, okay.
100%. The stuff that
Yeah.
I saw, even after she left, the stuff that I saw as a kid, you shouldn't see as children.
Yeah.
And she was an alcoholic. She only stopped drinking, I don't know, maybe 6 years ago now. And there were certain days that she was drinking, and as a 5, 6, 7-year-old, I knew the days that she'd drink. I knew where she hid her alcohol. You knew to avoid mummy when she was like that. And that's the sort of stuff that you shouldn't do. I don't understand how you do that to your kids. I know that everybody has a different background, but she had to go. We wouldn't be who we were today if she didn't go. I don't doubt that for a second. My dad really sacrificed a lot to keep us, I mean, as a dad would do, but sacrificed to keep us safe from her. She would drive with us in the car drunk. She would burn us accidentally with her cigarettes. She one day tried to park the car in the garage, but the car went back down the hill, had an accident on the way to baseball with us. Like, yeah, she had to go. Had to go.
You grew up very fast, given that.
I think my sister probably grew up. She's the eldest. She grew
Okay.
up the fastest. She had to become the mum. And then I was so confused as to why my mum wasn't there anymore. I again, but that's just your mum. You don't know that mums aren't a drunk. And so I think for me there was just a lot of confusion and loneliness after she left, because I felt like
Ooh,
my
no,
earpods
you're
have just
back.
died on me.
Oh, okay, that's cool. I can still hear you fine.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I was just lost. I didn't feel like I had anybody at my house. I felt like she was the closest person to me as well.
What has that done with your relationship to alcohol? I always wonder this, like as a teenager, for example, where we all, often will start dabbling a little bit. Did you go one way or the other drastically given that?
I didn't like. I
Mm.
think that it was still like alcohol was just fun. I didn't have any demons surrounding it.
Yeah.
Interestingly though, we would go and visit my mum, and friends of mine from school would come and stay with us, and of course she'd buy us alcohol so that we could get drunk. And again, hindsight, I understand why she was doing that, try and be the fun parent and whatever.
Mm.
But out of teenage years, I gave up drinking. I wasn't interested in drinking. I don't like the hangover from drinking, the anxiety from drinking. Yeah, so I guess as an adult, it kind of changed my perspective on it. But yeah, not so much as a baby.
It's amazing to hear like having an experience with a parent with like limitless boundaries. Like boundaries just don't exist. Like you can, she's smoking, she's drinking, you're able to, take part. And
Smoke and drink.
like, is that like, how did it impact your childhood knowing that you had all these limitless boundaries? Were you any different to, say, a friend of yours who perhaps had boundaries in place? Or did you have to be more mature because you had, I don't know, did it change you?
I think a lot of the time I love my dad. He did a really good job, but there wasn't a lot of fluff in our household. We had a stepmom. She was horrible. She didn't care about any of us as well. So I had this real juxtaposition of I'd go to my mum's house, and but at this point, my brother and sister had nothing to do with my mum. So mum held on to me for the longest that she could. And again, you grow up and I realized that she was just manipulating me the whole time. And so I yearned to live with her. And she lived 3 hours from where we lived. And I'd come home to my permanent home and felt so out of place, so unloved, so I didn't fit in, because when I was at my mum's house, everything just made sense, do you know? So I think, and my friends would come and stay with us because mum's house was the party house, because she'd buy us cigarettes, she'd buy us alcohol, but the most detrimental part of all of that was she'd drink with us and then she would take it out on me. Do you know, the first time I was ever called a slut was from my mum when I was 14 years old. And I wasn't doing anything. She just
Mm.
started attacking me, and so those things, these people who I grew up with, we went to a very good Christian school, and they'd come
Mhm.
and they would see behavior that now I would be terrified if my children were witnessing this behavior. So, yes, I was definitely different. Everybody knew that I was different, but when I was at home in my permanent house, so many rules and everything. So, yeah, it was just the holiday house when mum was still trying to manipulate me into being hers.
So inconsistent and unstable, instability for a child, which is,
Yeah.
yeah, it's crazy. And I have so much respect, I guess, for the person that because a lot of the time, if someone's been brought up in a way that's quite traumatic, quite frankly, they can go either which way. They can
Mhm.
rebel and go against everything that society thinks is acceptable, or they could kind of do what you've done, where it's like, you work your ass off to be better, to be a better version of yourself, to be a better parent,
100%.
to, and also have such an impact on so many other parents out there, which you have with the community that you've got. So I think it's so incredibly inspirational. What I would love to know is, how did this experience impact your sense of self-worth? Or has the sense of self-worth been, I don't know, your greatest life lesson given your childhood?
I think when you're a teenager, everything impacts you negatively. And I was a really lost teenager. I didn't feel like I fit in. I didn't feel like I was loved. So I didn't have any self of sense worth. I experimented with drugs.
Mm.
Not bad drugs by any means, but I
Yeah.
became like the naughty kid,
Yeah.
because I was just kind of looking for attention, you know. And then as I got older, when I've had my own kids, I guess everything that I had happen in my childhood is exactly who I'm never going to be. And I'm going to ensure that my children are going to be raised the way that I saw my friends being raised, you know, and that's all that I can take from my experience is that's just nothing I would ever let my children ever experience. That's all that I've taken from it.
How do you set boundaries then in your household, given all of that?
Um, the way I try and parent my children is to
Mm.
just raise them knowing how loved they are no matter what they're doing. So the boundaries that we have is friendship. And I mean I shout, don't get me wrong guys, I'm
Yeah,
still a
yeah.
very shouty mum when I get cross. But I just really need these kids to grow up knowing that they are loved, that they can always come home, because I didn't have any of that, you know? So that's all I want for my children, is to be happy, kind and loved. That's all that I can give to them now.
Yeah, it's so interesting because we had quite, in some extent, quite a polar opposite situation. So for myself, I have migrant parents, very strict, very disciplinarian. We don't want you to go anywhere. You don't even know what alcohol it means. And
Yeah,
meanwhile, I was this very social, bubbly, wanted to be at every party, and had to really fight my way to just like leave the house. And I had to always be home early. But then because of all of the restrictions and the boundaries placed on me, I would then go out and be the loudest at the party and be the party girl, because it's like I finally escaped. Watch me
yeah,
dance on tables, watch me smash a bottle of passion pop, like just like all those
100%.
things, because you're just rebelling against the walls that have been put around you. Having said
Yeah.
that, there's the good side where, like, I guess technically I did reasonably okay academically, but I did only because I had so many boundaries, and I knew if I didn't get A pluses, I'm not going to that party. So I'm
Yeah.
working my ass off to get to the party. And so that
Yeah,
was my
yeah, yeah,
motivation. But it's so interesting. So I look at my children and go, okay, I don't want to be like that. I think that it's so important that you don't feel a level of sort of conditional love sometimes. And I know our parents did the best they could, and all we can
yeah.
do is
So
sort of learn from
generational
those
for
lessons.
them.
But right, like it's like
Mm,
if you do this, then great, there's praise. And if you do not, what happened? Oh, got
yeah,
to do better next time. But there's no like soft landing. It's kind of just like, yeah. So I don't know. It's interesting. And then that's why I think hearing your story, for me, having the opposite in some extent with your mum, where you could have do whatever you wanted. Yeah, like I wondered, does that make you perhaps a bit more strict with your kids? But I guess it probably, well, it comes down to having that structure and expectations around what's appropriate in your household. Like, what does it look
yeah.
like?
Well, I feel like I'm a bit of a hybrid because dad had a
Mm.
certain way that we had to live at
Yeah,
dad's house. And then,
yeah,
you know, and him and mum didn't have a very good relationship. So there was no co-parenting back in the 90s.
yeah,
Um, and so dad still, we had to, you know, I had to get a job at 14 and 9 months. We had to do housework because we didn't have a mum to do housework, had
yeah,
to do the cooking and cleaning. So I have all of those expectations on my children.
yeah,
Often like my friend the other day was saying she's so stressed out. She has so much housework to do. And I'm like, you have kids. They live in your house as well. You have to
yeah,
participate in part of a household. And that's
yeah,
very much how I raise my kids. I'm a bit of an authoritarian parent.
yeah,
You know,
yeah,
I do have my rules and
yeah,
I expect respect from my children as well.
yeah.
But I think growing up with mum letting me do whatever I wanted to do, all that actually gave me as a kid was such a confusing feeling around who she was as a human, you know.
Mm.
I never had a place anywhere because nowhere felt comfortable for me because I got everything there and I got nothing here.
So crazy. So you're chugging along, you're doing life, you're out of teenagehood now, you're in your 20s, you're doing your thing. You're kind of feeling like, all right, like I'm just finding myself. Okay. And then what happens? Like motherhood happens, because I know with me, as soon as
Surprise!
I, right. And like it slaps you in the face sometimes, and all those hormones and all that childhood shit bubbles to the surface. I'd love to
Hugely.
know what that looked like for you, from like, footloose and fancy free to, oh my gosh, I'm pregnant. And then a lot of this stuff is coming up for me. Talk to us about it.
Well, but I had Will, I fell pregnant with Will when I was 22. Surprise.
Wow.
Um, and there was actually a huge pinnacle moment for me.
Mhm.
I'd actually, because I still was in relationship with my mum at that point,
Okay.
and I had asked her to come and stay with me because I'm 22. At
Mm.
that point, my dad's wife had left him and he was not there. No
Mm.
one was there. I was by myself. Obviously, I had Will's dad. Um, and I asked her to come and stay with me. And it was like 4 weeks out. I'm freaking the fuck out about having a baby at
Mm.
this point.
Yeah.
And she called me and she's like, I can't come to Sydney. And I was like, what do you mean you can't come to Sydney? She's like, it's too much for me, Laura. I can't come there. And I'm like, but I'm having a baby and I need you. She's like, not doing it. And then I was like, okay. And then I remember I
Yeah.
had him, and it was probably maybe a week or two after, and I was
Mm.
sitting with him, and I was, hormonal, emotional,
Mm.
and I was just like, how the fuck did she not come?
Mm.
How am I holding this kid who I would literally die for? And the one
Yeah.
thing that I have asked her in like the last 22 years of my life, she couldn't even do it for me. And then it all just kind of fell into place, this sense of abandonment, this self, never being good enough for anybody. But then through all of that, my destination in life was to be a mum. And when I held Will, like it was hard, but as he got bigger, and I was like, this is everything to me. This is everything that I always wanted. And I'm going to put everything I've always wanted into this child, So this realization at the same time that I actually don't have a mum, haven't had a mum since I was like 5 years old. All I've ever had is a burden, and I don't need that burden anymore. I don't need to pay her bills. I don't need to pay her rent. I don't need to have drunken phone calls telling me I'm not good enough, because this is no longer my life. And he's now my life. Huge
What
realization.
huge. What did you do on the daily when demons would arise, probably, and all those, you're not good enough. What are you doing? Oh, isn't it bad? Look, poor you, you were abandoned. Like all those, the critical voice, right? What did
Yeah.
you do to help simmer that down? And I ask because we all have that critical voice based on all of our own experiences. It might be
Yeah.
helpful for others to hear too.
I mean, I hope it's helpful. I literally just didn't want my kids to ever experience the feelings that I had. So all of those inner voices that I had, if you
Yeah.
still live with them as a parent, you're going to pass it on to your kids. I don't want my kids to ever cry because of me. Do you know? Like I always want them to know that I gave them my everything. So whenever I get into these, because I still get into these moods,
Of
fuck me,
course.
Mother's Day is like the worst day of my life. Um, Even though I have a very loving family, it's just a day that
Mm.
I'm so strongly reminded that my
Yeah.
mum didn't love me enough to stay with me. And so
Mm.
I have a day every year, and then I hold my kids the next day, and I've done this for forever, and I just tell them, you make my life so special, and I know that maybe we shouldn't put all of our love into our children, but they've kept me alive. Like they pull me out of my depression. I give everything to them, because without them I'd be nothing, and I know that.
Mm, mm. So really focusing in on when you hear those sort of critical voices come, it's like, well, let's focus back onto what is important, look down
Yeah.
at this baby that loves us and needs
Yeah.
us, and
Well,
just
and things that I can actually
refocus.
change. And
Yeah.
I can impact their lives. I can't change what happened to me.
Yes.
There's no point dwelling on it. I give
Yeah.
myself a day, but there's no point every
Yes.
day. That's not every time I go to see her. I see her maybe once
Yeah.
every 18 months, and I get that same
Mm.
feeling of dread, because all of your demons come back on, are you not good
Yeah.
enough? Should you have given her another, all of these
Mm.
things. But no,
Yes.
I do.
Yeah.
I refocus, and I'm like, I can't change that, but I can change them.
Mm. Resources that you've lent into over the years. Have you done therapy? Do you meditate?
Therapy was horrible.
Oh,
I did.
really?
I started, and I've said this to so many people. If you're on the
Mm.
fence about going to see a therapist, do it, because the first time that somebody outside of your circle
Yeah.
tells you that what you feel is okay, and that
Mm.
it wasn't you, is
Yeah.
such a redeeming quality. It just takes
Yeah.
this whole weight off your shoulders.
Yes.
Um, but then I think for me, the more that I delved into it,
Mm.
it just hurt so much, and I couldn't get through the hurt. And so I found that it would bring it up every second week, and then I would have like a couple of really down days. So for
Mm.
me, talk therapy was not the way out.
Yeah.
Um, to be honest, the therapy, I read a book actually. What was it called? The Emotionally Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Um, and that was one of the greatest books I've ever read in my life. And it brought so much light onto who I was raised by, um, both my mum and my dad. And yeah, I think that sort of book, talking to people on Instagram, like having a
Mm.
community of people who also had shitty upbringing. Not my upbringing wasn't shit. I have to not
Yeah.
say that. My dad did a really good job,
Yeah.
but having
Yeah.
conversations with other people that know what it's like to not have a mum, you know, to
Yeah.
come from such a broken family. It's so
Yeah.
healing to hear other people's
Oh,
stories, to know that when
yes.
you thought you were the only kid with a really shitty mum, no, turns out there were other kids. You just didn't know any of them.
Yes. How did you build your online community? Where did you start?
It was after Z was born. How old is she? She's 8. So it was around then. I lived in a place called Port Hedland over in Western Australia.
Yeah.
I didn't really have any friends there, and just started blogging to do something with my time. I've always liked writing. I always thought I'd be like a famous actress. I used to like practice my acceptance speeches in front of the mirror.
That's so
Um,
cool.
and so I've always, and I'm an introverted extrovert.
Yeah.
But so I'm down for conversations with strangers
Mm.
and things like that. So yeah, I started
Yeah.
because I was so lonely, and then yeah, you just kind of you find your people, and telling my story was cathartic as well, like getting to put my opinion down into words, because when I feel really heavily, it's nice to type, okay, there's my therapy. It's nice to get things off my chest through
Yep.
words.
Yep.
Yeah, and then connecting with people that are like, fuck, that was me too. I had that as well.
And that's what would happen. So back in the day, blogging, right? So what, people comment on your article? What was it like?
Well,
Because
so
I wasn't into that.
Instagram
Yeah.
8 years ago was just
Yeah.
photos, no stories.
Yeah.
And so I actually started with 100 Days of Happy. And so I literally just started talking about my life through 100
Yeah.
Days of Happiness. I'm not a fashion woman or anything like that, so I did
Yeah.
nothing like that. It was just
Yeah.
storytelling. And then
Yeah.
yeah, through storytelling, like yeah, masked other people and built relationships, and yeah, it just grew that way, very organically.
And so interestingly that you started off quite, it sounds like quite deep and raw content and, in order to sort of, yeah, be relatable to others who perhaps have had those experiences. And now I feel like there's a bit of a mix in there. I mean, like, for example, that post that I just shared at the start of this episode, that's so raw. You can't get any more raw than that. And so that content still exists. When did you also turn to humor, or did you always have humor as part of your content as well?
I think I always had humor. One of
Yeah.
my so gross. One of my earliest ones was Zali had like a punami and it had gone
Yeah.
everywhere. Do you know? So
Yeah.
I also talked about the ups and the downs of my days, and because I had so many children in it, like a small, and like life is chaos, right?
Yeah. Oh,
And so yeah,
yeah.
I'd talk about the poos in the baths or
Yeah.
getting weed on, or yeah. So I think it all
Yeah.
kind of, and then as Instagram developed, we
Yeah.
also had to develop and find a different way to tell our stories. So that's how it all kind of
Yes.
came to where we are now.
Yeah. Do you still find it cathartic?
100%. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
find when I'm holding into things, even if I don't post it, I'm not a journaler. I don't meditate. All of the things they tell you to do, my brain's too busy for all that stuff
Yeah.
until I
Yeah.
feel something really heavily. And then I
Yep.
just get my notes, or I'll send
Yep.
myself a text message, and
Yep.
I would just go, "Bleh." And then some days
Yes.
I'll share it. I don't like to be deep and dark and mysterious all the time.
Yep.
Somebody once said to me, if you put too much emotion on the internet, people are going to think you're fucked in the head. So I just kind of like,
That's the best.
I just hold it in some days.
Good little motto for life. Yeah, just FYI.
The bumper sticker. Don't share too much, they'll think you're fucked in the head. So I just hold
I
it in.
I love that. And then, nicely articulate your message, and just drop that in as it goes. I've got to, okay, so I want to read this out because I feel like this is also context for my next question because, yeah, it's not all dandy having a big community. There's also the bigger the community, the more the opinions. So you wrote, I think it was a little while ago now, but you said, some days the insults hurt a little more than they should. I get it. It's part of the online world. Difference of opinion is one thing, but when someone makes fun of your appearance, it hits really differently. Just a nice neighborly reminder that if you wouldn't say it to someone's face, then refrain from typing it out. Lols at the tough, oh, yeah, lols at the tough guys that just say in their heads, oh, who just said in their heads, oh, yeah, but I would say it to your face. You're lying. So,
Yeah.
I love that. But I mean, it just talks to, and I'd love your opinion and your feedback on this. With the positive comes the trolls. What has been your experience with that?
I'd touch wood. I don't get a lot of hate.
Yeah.
The most hate that I get is if I do a paid job and people will send me messages being like, "You've changed," and I write back, "No, I need to earn money. Like,
Yeah,
I'm in a
exactly.
position to earn money with my
Yep.
page. Who would
Yep.
like? Would you call someone and be like, 'Oh, you're going to work at Coles today, you knob?'
Yeah.
You'd never. So let me be.
Exactly.
Let me do my stuff."
Yeah.
Those horrible websites that people used to go on. It was called
Oh,
Go Me Blog. I believe that left a while ago.
okay.
The last time that I read hate on that webpage
Mm,
was probably like 5 or 6 years ago.
mm,
And it was that day because I cried my eyes out. And I messaged my friend and I was just like, how are these people so mean? But then,
mm.
like, the insults that they were giving me was like, she laughs so loud, um, loves her children so much that she doesn't send them to school on their birthdays, shows boring parts of her life. And I was just like,
Yeah.
where I got to and where I had to do it in my head, because I'd literally lose days if I read these things.
Mm,
I imagine these women, I assume,
mm.
would they sit there with their children and be like, "Do you know what I did today? I went and looked at this person's stories and then I went to a different website and went, she shit." Would you tell your
Yeah.
kids that you did that? Would you
Yeah.
be so proud to sit with your mum and dad and be like, "I troll people on the internet and
Yeah.
other people clap me for doing it"? And that was when I
Mm,
kind of got to the point I'm like, I feel so sorry for you. Like,
yeah.
if you think I'm shit because I share my life,
Yeah.
sweetheart, you're
Yeah.
being mean to people without a face. Would you
Yeah.
tell your children that you're doing that? Because I
Yeah.
would never. Like, don't we want our
Mm,
children to not be bullied? Don't, like,
yeah.
and then when I put that perspective into my head, I've got a
Mm.
friend who reads these gossip things because she's like, I'd rather that I know what they talk about me. Why? Why would you do
Why? I
it?
know,
I don't
yuck.
need
I
that. I get
couldn't.
insulted enough when
No.
my kids are mean to me, do you know? Like, I don't need it. And
Why?
I'm just living my life.
Yes. And I also wonder as well, I mean, all of us feel, we want to feel loved and like, and it hits hard, right? But I also think, and I wonder, and please correct me, but given your childhood, that extra layer of complexity that you experienced, would that potentially mean that for you it like hits that little bit harder? Like, what are your thoughts?
I don't think so. I think I
Yeah.
actually developed a pretty thick skin through my
Okay.
childhood.
Yeah.
Because when it's your mum calling you the worst names in the world, it can be anybody else calling you stuff. And I actually just think it's a reflection of you. It's not a
Yeah.
reflection of me. I don't
Yeah.
hate you for doing what you do.
Yeah.
So why do you judge me so harshly for doing what I do? There was
Yeah.
there was a time where I'd get messages about being overweight, or people made fun of me for wearing bike shorts,
Oh,
and they
God.
really hurt. And because I've had body issues my whole life,
Mm,
that would cause me to go inward for a couple of days, and then I'd kind of come back out again and be like, well,
mm.
I really enjoy doing this, and this is new. Like, all of this is new,
Yeah.
and this is
Yep.
what our world is now. Why do you
Yeah.
hate me for landing a job like this?
Yeah.
I try and just squashed it all that way. The last time I did actually use it as a learning tool for my son because he's 16.
Yeah.
And I showed him these messages, and I'm like, this is what social media is, Chook. Like, you can put yourself on social media and you can have these beautiful relationships with people. There's going to be people that don't like you, because in the
Yeah.
real world, there's always people that aren't going to like you, but you don't
Yeah.
have to deal with them.
Yeah.
Whereas these trolls actively watch people's stories to then go and hate them. And
Yeah.
I think to myself, you're doing more damage. And I said to Will, so if you get people that hate on you on social media, it's a reflection of them, bud, not a reflection of you. And
Yeah.
it's not something to take on board, because I literally don't think they'd ever say it. Like, I really don't think they'd ever say it to your face. And like I said on
Yeah.
that thing, there'd be some people, again, behind their keyboards, I'd say it to her
Yeah.
face. What's going on?
You wouldn't, mate.
You probably live like 8 hours away. You're gonna drive to my house, knock on my door, and be like, "You're not funny." I don't care. I
I
don't
think
care.
totally. And I think for those listening as well, I mean, not all of us, I guess, experience the trolls, because we don't have massive communities and things like that. But I think it is just, I find it really an interesting question to ask, because in our day-to-day life, right, we already feel that we can feel a little bit critical towards the way we do things. And then the last thing you want is your in-laws butting in and saying you're doing that wrong or this, or and there's always other people that have opinions. So I think it's just grounding for us all to hear that perhaps when we do get those other opinions, and if they don't sit right for us, it's kind of like, well, I'm pretty confident in myself and in what I'm doing, and this feels authentic to me. And you're welcome to have your opinion, but fundamentally, I'm gonna stick in my lane, and you can stick in yours. I mean, what would you say, I guess, Laura, from an everyday perspective?
With the trolls?
With just if those listening who kind of feel like they might not necessarily have trolls per se, but people that come pop up in their lives that all have all these opinions, perhaps around the way they parent, the way they live, some, I guess, some feedback back at how they can make it not hurt them.
I think that the most important thing is to always look at the person who's giving you the information. If you wouldn't go to them for advice,
Yeah.
then you don't need to take on their negative feedback, because their opinion literally doesn't matter. Like
Yes.
I remember when I had Will, I couldn't breastfeed and I was going to bottle feed him, and I was so afraid to tell his grandmother at the time, which was his dad's mum, petrified, because I knew that she was going to judge me. And so I used to hide the tins of formula when she'd come over so
Wow.
that she wouldn't see them. I was 22 though, so impressionable, so afraid of the world. Whereas now I'd just be like, this is what I have to do to survive. So whatever it is that you're doing, whatever it is you're wearing, however you want to wear your hair, opinions don't matter of other people. I'm also not one to fit in with the crowd. I do a lot of things that I do because I want to do them. I just think everybody is allowed to be their own person. If people are going to tell you that you're no good because you do things a certain way, that's fine. It might not suit them, but does it suit you? And if it suits you, what does it matter?
100%. Yeah, so true. I love that. I guess to wrap up, how do you feel parenthood has changed you as a person? It's a question I ask all of my guests.
It made me who I am as a person. I had Will when I was so little. I didn't know who I was at 22, So I've grown up with him, and I think that parenting has allowed me to actually just stop and take a look around and appreciate everything that I have in my life. Whereas I lived for so many years of my life not appreciating it. These small humans that you make are everything. They are our future generations. They're my future family, and everything that we pour into them is how they're going to go and sprout themselves into the world. I'm so proud every day of the kids that I've made.
Yes, it's so true. It's the greatest job, and the most,
Really?
I guess, it's the greatest job that we could ever, and the greatest responsibility, really. And I think, particularly given all of our experiences and the lessons from our childhood, we can really sit there and go, I mean, what I've taken out of this conversation is it doesn't matter what happened as a child and things like that, but in a way it helps you build resilience, it helps you build,
Absolutely.
and it forms you, and you can learn from the lessons and do differently next time. So I think that's amazing. You're such a freaking inspiration, and I love your work, so keep doing what you're doing. Is there anything sort of coming up for you, or that you want to sort of share with our community, I guess, moving into Christmas? What's the haps in Laura's world?
Well, we're going to Europe for Christmas this year, actually.
Oh,
So
fabulous.
I know, I'm beyond excited. I have my Christmas store, but I'm only doing like limited qualities this year because I just don't have the capacity. I'm also doing university, and so I've got a lot on my plate. So Christmas will be shrunk this year for Home with Laura Bentley, but then we're jet setting on like the 10th of December, and I'm going to go and have hopefully a white Christmas. So I'm frothing.
Oh, fabulous. Where are you going?
We're going Germany, Czech Republic, Austria, Switzerland, Italy, and France.
Oh, wow. How long
I know.
for? Wow.
I know.
Not doing things in halves.
I get like so hot and sweaty when I say
Wow,
that. I can't even believe it comes out of my mouth.
Yeah. So wait, how long for?
4 weeks.
Oh, fabulous. The whole fan band on the journey? Okay. Is this
I
the
know,
first
I'm
sort
so
of
excited.
international soiree more recently with all children? Or when was,
No, we got married in Fiji 10 years ago, and
Oh,
only
did
Will and
you?
Indiana were at our wedding. And like I think
Ah,
since then, I don't think we've even had a holiday for over a year. So
yeah. Oh,
stoked.
so
I
exciting. Well,
know.
if you need any hot tips on travel with children, hit me up because I do. I actually just recently released a travel series whilst I was international with my kids as well. So if you need any
Amazing.
hot tips, you know where to go.
I love it.
No, thank you so much, Laura, again for your time. And it was fab touching
No,
base.
stoked. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. I'll hit stop.